Okay, I believe we are live. So great. Welcome to Tamarah's Closet today. I have with me a really great guest today. I'm really excited, not just because he has a wonderful book out, but he's also a retired police officer. And I used to have these dreams, and a detective, and I used to have these dreams years ago about being a detective. So it's fun just to be able to sit down with someone who is a detective. I've never done that before. So he has a wonderful story to share, and I believe you will find a great inspiration here today. We're going to be talking about his new book that is out from a trilogy that he has, the Omega Chronicles, and this is Invasion at Miratev. I hope I pronounced that right, but I'll have him say it right when he comes on. So, and I've just gotten started. I didn't get to read as much as I want to. I've been sick, but it didn't take me long before I was like, I know I'm going to love this book. So it's great. So I want to go ahead and bring him out today so we can get started. And Tamarah Closet gives a warm welcome to Brian Nicholson. Brian, say hello so I know you're still with me.
Hey, Tamarah. I can hear you.
Good, good. Well, I'm really excited to have you here today, Brian, because I think both of your careers fascinate me. And so I wanted to have a chance for you to talk a little bit about both. And I know you mentioned you've loved science fiction for as long as you can remember, Brian. Do you remember were you a very imaginative child? Did your parents talk about that at all with you, or?
You know, I don't know. I've always liked science fiction. I think it's because, see, when I was younger, I'm giving up how old I am, but when I was younger, you know, my older brother, and his name's Roger. He and I specifically, we used to follow the space program, you know, and we watched the Apollo missions and the first man on the moon and the shuttles and all that stuff. And so we ate up anything that was science fiction. Of course, you know, Star Trek was our favorite, you know, Battlestar Galactica when that came out, and then of course Star Wars. And it's just always been something that just fascinates me. You know, I think a lot of it has to do with the type of future where, like Star Trek, for instance, where, you know, everybody gets along, everybody's equal. There's no, you know, racism kind of stuff going on there. Everybody is important and does a job. And it just is kind of a neat world. It always was kind of escapism for us. And Roger loves to make models, and so he's better at it than I am. But he used to have models of every one of the, you know, every one of the ships in Star Trek, and you know, he had models of the rockets for the space program, and he and I mostly. My younger brother less so. He got interested later on, but yeah, we used to just eat that stuff up. So I just love it.
So he made the models and things that you collected, and
they used to sell kits back in the day.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if they still sell them, and then Roger and I actually too, we used to play with model rockets. You know, you make the models and go out to your local park and shoot them in the air, and that was just, I mean, it was great. It's just something I've always been interested in. And, you know, that's usually kind of the books that I gravitate to if I'm going to read a book or watch a movie. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know I love Star Trek. I used to watch, I guess when I was watching it, it had already gone off the air, and it was maybe the reruns, but you know, I don't really know. I can't say really why I liked that show, but I just did. And I liked Captain Kirk. I liked, was it Dr. Spock, and all of them. I think a lot of people, that was such a popular show, and it, you know, for me, I liked it better than some of the movies and things that are out today. Just, I guess, because it was more simple then. I don't know what it is. I just really did like that show. So
I still watch the classic series. You know, they have them on Netflix, and you can
go. Do they?
And yeah, you go on and watch them, and they're just even the you know, the older ones. I mean, they're like 50 years old now, the stories, but the writing was just so good back then, and the messages they put across. And they translate to today, kind of messages of hope and stuff. And I think we kind of need that. Things are a lot of turmoil, a lot of dissension, and I like a universe where people get along a little better. I guess.
I do too, and I think that I agree, and I think that's what I liked about the show. It was so, I don't know, it was more simple and did have great messages, and the focus wasn't so much on all the technology, which I thought was cool. I don't know, but do you remember if you when you were young, like in school, did you write any science fiction when you were really young, watching that, or did you?
Not so much writing it back then. I mean, you always, I think, like anybody, when you're a kid and you have imagination. See, back when I was a kid, nobody was running around with their face buried in their phones, and there was no internet, and so we had a lot more. We had to use more of our imagination to entertain ourselves, and so yeah, we used to come up with just stories. I don't know if I ever put any of them down until this one, but I remember when Roger, my older brother, again, one of his presents for birthday or Christmas was just a cassette tape recorder, and we used to make these goofy, tape recordings, science fiction stuff, and just having fun. So I think it was a lot simpler then. I think it was easier to use your imagination because you didn't have all the distractions and the games and the TV and all that stuff like they do now. I'm not criticizing the modern generation, because if I would have been born now, I would have gotten sucked right into it too, just like the rest. So
I know.
Yeah.
I know, but it's true. It is true, though. That is a fact. I think people, when we were growing up, you were forced to use your imagination much more because you didn't have all the technology and the distractions. And I think that is important. I think the more imaginative you have to be, it tests your creativity, and I do think that is something missing today. But I'm like you. I know it's because of what we grew up with. At the same time, if I were living today, if I were a kid today, I know I'd be right into it too. Although I have to say, I'm glad that I'm not. I'm glad that I did learn to use my imagination more when I think it's made me more creative, So,
I agree. I think so too.
Yeah, I agree. So were either of your parents or anybody in your family background, were they writers or any in the arts in any way, or?
Actually, I have a cousin, a first cousin, who's a children's book author. She's published several books. Her name's Leslie Evans. She lives in Virginia, so I don't really get to see her as often as I'd like, but she's actually was a little bit inspiring to me because she kind of, did the whole published thing, and she's very successful, has book signings all over the place. And she's been really supportive of me doing this. And I think last I heard, I believe she's trying, because she writes children's books. Last I heard, she's trying to write a novel now. So she, I wish her luck. It's a lot of fun. And then I actually have, you asked about my parents, not really any of them, but my extended family now. I have a nephew, Roger's son, as a matter of fact, who writes fantasy things, and he's in college right now, but I've been kind of talking to him, and when the time comes that he's going to start looking for publishers, at least I've been through the grind, and I can guide him in that. So I think the creativity gene runs out there. I'm not saying it comes from me, but yeah, it's floating around there in my family. I have my sister and her daughters are just fabulous professional level singers. So the talent runs. My dad's a great performer, and so I don't know. I guess it's in our blood, creativity. It's there.
Yeah,
somewhere.
that's great. That's great though that you have that support group, and that especially with your cousin being a writer and having published books. So that's always great to have that support.
I've actually had several of my police friends too have written books about experiences. One of my old sergeants he self-published a book about some of his experience. And then I had one of my friends that did a fictional novel about a police story. And so I think it's just I think it's because you write all those police reports, you hone your writing style and you know what works. And there's nothing more, nothing will help you more than having a district attorney throw your report back at you and say, hey, your grammar stinks. You need to correct this. And you learn real quick. You learn real quick how to get things right and to word things the right way. So that helped a lot as far as that goes.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it did. Now, when you were going back to those models, do you still have any of those models today?
Oh gosh, I wish. They'd probably be worth a lot of money. The originals, they didn't survive, unfortunately. A lot of the toys that we had when we were younger, I so wish I would have had the foresight to just stick them in a box somewhere. But you know how things go. I mean, we were talking 45, 50 years ago. I wish I had some of that stuff because I could probably make a lot of money off some toy collector that would like to use those. But my brother, I don't know if he has any of them left or not. He was more the model maker than I was. I kind of let him build them and then I played with them. It was neat one time talking about NASA. We travel around the country a lot for what we do for a living right now. And we got to go to Huntsville, Alabama once, and they have a full scale Saturn V rocket there. I don't know if Saturn V is what they launched the moon shots to, Apollo 11 and those, and they have one there. It was really cool to see it actually up close and personal.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was neat.
That was. Well, what or who would you attribute your great passion or maybe obsession with science fiction, like when you were young and even today?
I don't know if there's anyone specifically. I used to read a lot more when I had more time, and the kind of books that I gravitated to, I'd mentioned Star Trek and Star Wars, and there's a lot of writers that will expand. They call the expanded universe, where they go in and they take the baseline characters and then write their own novels associated with those. And I remember reading a lot of those. There's just tons and tons of them out there. I don't know what the number is, but I've always just been fascinated with the whole military science fiction kind of thing, carriers and fighters and aliens and space battles. It's just what I always have thought was interesting. And there's a particular series that I used to really read a lot of, and it wasn't just one writer. I think the author's name, the original, I probably get this wrong. If some of the sci-fi purists out there are going to probably jump on me for this, but there's an author named David Weber, and he wrote a book called Bolo, and it's about these super tanks that are they put a human consciousness in them, like somebody who's died, and they put that consciousness in the tank. So they're these alive sentient tanks. And the earlier stories, they're more basic, and then as they get later on, they're more fancy and advanced, and just cool stuff. So that's what inspires me. So that's the kind of thing that I tend to gravitate towards, and so that's kind of why my story, is kind of that's why it has the tone that it does, because that's the kind of stuff I like. I figure it's good to write about stuff you like. You probably write a better story. So yeah,
oh, definitely. And the fact that I read a lot as a kid, I read all the Nancy Drew, and there was another series I read. It was a veterinarian. It was a woman, but I cannot remember the series now. But she was a horse veterinarian, large animal vet, and I read a lot. And I think when you read a lot, the more you read, and especially if you start young, it helps you develop the ability to write, for sure. So you obviously read a lot because you're a great writer. I really enjoy. You're very descriptive, so that's very it's very nice reading. I really enjoy.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's very good. Well, what about Star Trek drew you in the most? Do you think, like, I know you talked about the stories, but was it because it is so different than the sci-fi today, was it specific characters or or was it just the stories that drew you in?
I've just been always I guess the idea that you know, you're in a spaceship, and the cool thing about Star Trek is that every week it would be, they would find some new alien race or some new planet, you know, and I've always just been one of those people, you know, you look up in the sky and you see a billion stars and you think to yourself, it would be really neat to meet the people that are on these other worlds. You know, it just always has been really fascinating. And, you know, I don't know if they look like us. I would, you know, I don't know. I don't know if they have multiple arms and legs. I don't really know how that works. But it's just interesting because your imagination can really go anywhere when you think about that. I mean, there's a limitless, I can't count the number of stars in the sky. So there's a lot of possibilities. And I thought that the writing in that series in particular was just really good. And they threw a lot of philosophy in there, you know, that, and like I kind of said earlier, there's a lot of hope for the future. You know, people weren't worried about medical care. If you got sick, you go down to the doctor and she fixes you. And, you know, that's kind of a nice thing. You know, they didn't have to worry about some of the things we have to worry about nowadays. I think it was just the whole idea of hope, you know, hope and harmony. That would be really, I think that always drew me towards that. So, which is interesting since I wrote a book about war.
I know you did.
But, you know, I don't know.
But that's good. Well, how would you compare it to, like, say Star Wars and Star Trek? How would you compare those two outside the obvious, which is the advance in technology? Because they are different. I mean, do you think that I only saw the first Star Wars and I love the first one, but I may have seen the second one. I really don't remember. It's been so long, but I tended to not like the other ones that came out. You know, I lost interest, and I'm wondering if what you saw in the comparison of the two, because I don't know.
Well, one thing you mentioned about Star Wars. One thing about Star Wars that I thought was kind of interesting is George Lucas created his universe, and everything was, you know, everything wasn't shiny and new and bright. It was, you know, used, and you have, you know, like in the very first one, you know, Luke works in his workshop and he's got all this kind of junk lying around, and it's all super advanced stuff that we don't have nowadays. But I mean, it's just normal in their universe. I thought that was more of a realistic view of the future, where, you know, Star Trek, everything's, you know, shiny and pretty and brand new. I mean, that's not a criticism. It's just there's just differences between the two. And George Lucas, you know, he created that whole universe, which is kudos to him. I mean, my goodness, he has a huge following throughout the world. And I know what you mean about some of the subsequent movies. You're not the only one. I've heard people were, you know, disappointed in some of them, and some were better than others. I think that, you know, and, you know, now Disney has bought the rights to Star Wars, and they, you know, they're sticking it in their theme parks, and they're in charge of these new movies. And the last couple I saw, Rogue One was one. I thought that was really well done. If you have not seen them, that actually, you can see it takes place before the very first Star Wars movie. You know,
which was that? Which was what was that?
It's called Rogue One.
Rogue One.
It was very good, and they're having a movie come out about Han Solo, a standalone movie of him, and I kind of like the direction they're taking there. And of course, they're making as much money as they can off it. You know, they're business people, but but the stories they come up with, you know, are really good. J.J. Abrams, he's a director in Hollywood. He does a lot of this type of stuff, this science fiction and fantasy and that type of thing. He's a fantastic director. I think they've used him a few times, and he's directed a couple of the new Star Trek movies. So, you know, if they keep getting caliber people like that, I think they're going to be having this for a long time to come. But yeah. But I know what you're talking about. Some people weren't real happy with the second trilogy. They thought some of the storylines were a little, I don't know. I won't go into too much. I watched them all.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think they're good. But I'm one of those. I don't tend to watch. I watch a movie, and if it has a sequel, I rarely like the second one better as much as the first. But that's just me. I think I like I like the impact of the first one, and sometimes I like the second one, but if they keep going on, sometimes I just lose interest or whatever. But
I know what you mean. Well, it's kind of like with this story. You said trilogy, and yeah, I'm going to wrap up, I think, my main characters in the trilogy. But the way it's structured, I can keep going on forever with my characters and write as many books afterwards. But we'll see. With me, you talked about like sometimes people will see things out of order. I'll go into a bookstore and this is a little off subject, but I mean, I'll go in and I'll see a book that's book 2 in a series, and that will make me want to buy book 1 and book 3 and buy the whole series. So, you know, sometimes, yeah, the second installment can be better than the first.
Oh yeah.
I don't think that's uncommon. So
no,
anyway.
no. But what? When I go back, because what made you? I know you got married, you had kids, you know, you went to college. What made you want to become a police officer?
You know, it wasn't really planned. I'm a little embarrassed because for that part, because there are people that strive all their lives to do this. You know, they do all the thing. They always know what they want to do. Unfortunately, when I was in college, it wasn't that I was aimless. I just didn't find anything that really interested me. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And after I got married to my wife, Cheryl, I ended up contracting mononucleosis my junior year, the first part of my junior year. And I don't know how familiar you are with that, but it just knocks you out. You can't do anything. You got no energy. What I remember about that particular time of year, that's when the Challenger space shuttle blew up. That's one of those things in my mind, seminal moment. So I remember that year very well. So I was sick at home watching that on TV. But anyway, and so we decided to go home for the summer, that I would withdraw and go home for the summer and earn some money and then come back the next year and continue schooling. And I happened to see that there was an ad in the paper for police officers, and it really had never even dawned on me until that moment. And so I tested at 3 different departments, and I got job offers from 2 of them. And one of them happened to be in my hometown of Fremont, California. And so I decided to start there. And I loved it. It was a great job. Very exciting. It's always different every day. You know, it's not like sitting behind a desk. And even when I was a detective, I mean, you're going out and you're doing stuff, and it's always different. It's always exciting. So we used to joke that, you know, people say, well, you know, you get paid a lot of money sometimes for sitting around and doing not a lot. Well, it's a joke, but amongst policemen is that, you know, it's 95% boredom and 5% terror. So you earn your money in those 5%.
Yeah, I know. What did you, as a police officer, did you continue to read a lot of science fiction whenever you could, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was always there. You know, you have to balance stuff. It's a practical part. You have to make money. You got to feed your kids. You got to make your house payment. But yeah, that stuff never went away. I still would always read. And as a matter of fact, if I go into my storage unit, I probably have old boxes full of old science fiction, you know, paperback books in there that I've accumulated over the years. So, yep, that always was there.
Yeah. Well, what do you think you like most about being a detective? Because I think there is a kind of a correlation between, you know, with that and science fiction, just because there's this solving mysteries, and Captain Kirk was always trying to catch the criminals and solve things. And, you know, there is, I mean, I can see where there is a correlation there, but what do you think you like most about it?
About being a detective?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was the thing about in our department is that our detective division, and you had to test to become a detective. You had to, you know, do interviews, and you had to study, and you had to sit before an oral board, and they would ask you these questions. And so if you didn't know the law, you know, you had to follow legal updates. And so it was a good position because, I mean, to be honest, being a detective is the greatest job. You have a lot of freedom. I remember the first time when I used to work on patrol, you know, we call them the uniforms, you know, the guys that wear the regular police uniforms. And usually you're standing outside the scene behind the tape, making sure nobody gets in. And then the detectives would show up, and they'd just walk right through, you know, walk into the scene, and they got to go in and see all the cool stuff and do all the interesting work. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to do that someday. And so when the day and the time finally came that I got to do it, it was really neat. I worked with a lot of just really good people, excellent officers, and learned a lot from them. It's, we have the detective division in our department is you only get to do it for about 3 years, and then you rotate back out to patrol, and they do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and they do that so that you've got these experienced officers that are now coming back into patrol that can mentor the newer officers and show them the right way to do cases and stuff. But when I was in detectives, they had 2 halves to it. One was called crimes against persons, and that was like robbery, rape, homicide, child abuse, child molest, that kind of stuff. And then the other property crimes was like, burglaries and auto theft and that kind of stuff. And I always wanted to work the crimes against persons side, because those are, honestly, those are the more interesting cases, that kind of stuff. And so I ended up becoming a child abuse, child molest / detective, and which sounds kind of, and it was rough in a way because I had little kids at home. But the cool thing about that job is you get to put some very bad people away for a long time. So that was kind of the payoff of it. But when you do that type of a job, you have to really be on your toes and look at every little thing and track down leads and follow up things that might not be really apparent. And it just I don't know, I just loved it. It was the best part of my career, my law enforcement career, was doing that.
Yeah, well, I can see that because I've had people. I think I told you when I sent you the questions that I really did go through a period many years ago where I would have all these dreams about. I dream a lot, and I was always a detective in the dream, and it was funny. And I think it was just because I watched so many. I typically like movies that guys like. Like, I'm not a chick flick girl. I like to watch the mysteries and the thrillers. And it's not because I like the violence. It's because I like solving the puzzle. I like crime dramas. I like to try to figure things out and solve a puzzle. And I've actually had people say, you should have been someone who solved crimes, like a police officer. I said, well, I don't think I could have gotten, because I like guns, but but I don't, I know it's not a game, but I think I would have enjoyed that detective part. I wouldn't have enjoyed being out there actually risking my life, so but I'm fascinated with it and fascinated with forensics and all that. So I think, I can see where you would enjoy that part of helping people, and
that's what it was, the particular cases that I used to work, we're helping, children, which was always a good thing. If you can protect children, that's always a big payoff. If you can stop them from being hurt, if you can take them out of a situation where they're getting injured or they're being abused or something, that was always a good thing. Sad that we live in type of a place where somebody would hurt a child, but it's just the way it is. And so you do as much as you can to try to make as much of a difference. So that part of it was really positive. But you talked about watching on TV, and TV detectives they're not really, that's not really how it is.
I'm sure.
Hollywood, yeah. I see some of one of the shows I watch, it's completely unrealistic as far as procedures, Hawaii Five-0. I don't know if you've ever seen it, the new one.
Oh, I used to love that.
Well, it's funny though, because the stuff they get away with, any regular police officer would go to jail for. So
yeah.
But it's always fun to watch, But the police career, actually, there's a part of the storyline in the book that I wrote that has to do with police officers. So my experience as a detective helped a lot in that, because I know how I would have thought had I been faced with the same situation, and so that was kind of helpful. You gotta mix in some of the stuff into your stories, kind of makes it a little more believable, I guess.
Oh yeah. Well, I know you learned a lot. And while you were a police officer, I know you said you improved your writing skills, and I never would have thought about that until I I read your little bio that you sent me. Can you elaborate on that about, you know, the story you were mulling over in your head and how you started to begin to write a little bit on that? What was that computer you were writing on?
It was that was way back in the day. That was a Tandy 1000. That was my first desktop computer. Oh my gosh, I can't even remember how many years ago that was. But I mean, it was like, I think it had, you know, 256K of memory. I mean, which is nothing nowadays. I mean, my phone has 128 gigabytes of memory. So things have come a long way, but it wasn't really something that I was, you know, I sat down and said, okay, I'm going to be a writer. It's just thoughts I thought about. I thought, yeah, you know, it'd be kind of cool to kind of mull over the story. And so I had a really basic word processing program. And so, you know, it's funny when you were introducing the book, the name Miratev, you got it right, by the way.
Did I get it right? Oh, good.
Well, actually, that is when you're looking for names. When you're looking for names for planets and characters and stuff like that, sometimes you look around your desk and you kind of jiggle words around. I used to have floppy disks that the brand name was Verbatim, so I kind of put it backwards and switched a couple of letters, and that's where Miratev came from. It was Verbatim was the name of the name of the floppy disk. No, you did good though. You got it right. So.
Oh, that's great. No, and I wanted to show your book because I think I forgot to hold it up when I was introducing
you. Oh, that's
you.
I can see the background. You got closer to the background.
Yeah, but, it's pretty. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, they employed an artist named Charles Bernard, and he sent me about 4 or 5 different concepts for the cover. This one was the best one. He did a fabulous job. I was so pleased. You know, you've seen cover art. You see cover art sometimes on some of the other books that are out there, and it's pretty basic. And I understand. I mean, you know, cover artists cost a lot of money. I don't know, you know, what it costs a publisher to have somebody do an original piece of artwork like this. But he kind of read over the synopsis of the story, and then, you know, came up with the Takar, the alien species. That's the concept he came up with, which actually, honestly, wasn't my original vision, but I thought what he came up with was actually a little better. So,
okay.
He did a great job. He really did. I'm very pleased with how the artwork came out. So,
I thought it was really good. I was wondering how that came about. So I didn't realize it was that expensive to do the cover art. I mean, that's just something I don't know anything about. But
I don't know how much it cost. I wasn't into that part of it. The publisher dealt with that. But yeah, it's not, you know, to get somebody of that professional quality, I'm sure it cost a few bucks. So, but yeah, I couldn't say enough good things about him. He can do my cover art any day of the week.
Yeah, I know. It's great. Well, during your years as a detective, did you dream a lot about your science fiction stories to write, or did you, because it sounds like you kind of went back and forth, and I mean, because you seem to also find a great passion in being a detective. I mean,
it was fun. You know, I kind of wrote down, I kind of played around with the storyline, and saved it on my floppy disk on that old computer. And these were like the big, I don't know if you remember the 5 1/4-inch floppy disks. They're like this big.
Yeah.
And anyway, and I saved it on that. But fortunately, I had also printed a hard copy out and gave it to Roger, my older brother, to kind of for safekeeping for him to look at. And so over the years, you just, you know, things come and go, and life, you know, things more important get in your way. And so I was doing police work. I was supporting my family, and so I kind of just it just kind of dropped off my radar for a while. And then a few years ago, actually, let me see, about 5 years ago, I guess, my younger brother Steve said, "Hey, whatever happened to that story you were writing?" And I said, "Oh, you know, it's on that old computer that's long gone." And my brother said, my older brother Roger, he said, "Well, hey, I actually have these 150 pages that you originally wrote." And so he gave them to me, and I scanned them because I was too lazy to type them all out again. so I scanned them in my computer, and did some updating and then completed the story. And it was actually my younger brother Steve was the one who really urged me to do that. And Roger, my older brother, kind of acted as my editor the first time, and you know, kind of suggested tweaks to the storyline, and they were good suggestions. Steve, my younger brother, has a book club, and they took one of my drafts and read it in their book club, and so I got some good feedback from them, and so the story that you see now has been through probably a dozen editors and, you know, suggestions and stuff. I think it turned out pretty good with the input. You know, not all the input I took. You know, they say, well, you should change this, you should make this character this, and it's like, no, I like the way it is. So I would take suggestion, but only to a point.
Yeah. Well, when you started, did you know you were going to do a trilogy when you first started, or?
It wasn't specifically a trilogy. I wanted to create these characters, and I mean, if it would have taken 4 or 5 books to get to the end, you know, that's fine. But I think that I mean, you can only draw out certain storylines, I think, for so long before it gets a little, you know, to the point where you got to have some type of resolution. I think the reader will get a little bored if you tease them for too long. So I think a trilogy is a good length to complete the main, you know, the main storylines. See, when you write these things, and I learned this isn't something, you know, that I thought myself. A story, when you write it, you have, like, say 5 different lines, and they kind of go down, and then they intertwine, and they tangle around each other, and then at the end they end up meeting, and then, you know, then your main storyline is complete. So even at the end of this, you know, the characters that are in these main storylines that I'm dealing with right now, even at the end of this, the war against this alien species is still going to be going on, you know, and there's still going to be adventures to be had by these Omega super soldiers. So I have a lot of room to keep going on with it, as, you know, indefinitely if I want. So
yeah.
So, but it's fun. It's one of the things. There's a part in this book where they have a terrorist that they're interrogating, and they use some interrogation techniques that every police officer wishes they could use, but you know, you can't do that kind of stuff, but you can in this universe. So in a way, it's a little kind of satisfying. Nothing horrible. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. You'll see when you get to it. But very satisfying sometimes in some of the stuff that you can write. And there's a few characters. I'm not going to tell you who. Okay. But it's neat when you're looking for names for heroes and villains and good guys and bad guys. I mean, you use your friends, you use your family. I had my brother Steve. I said, hey, I need some names for some bad guys, and so he gave me a whole list of names of people that he's run across in his lifetime that may have, you know, crossed him or something. He says, yeah, this guy should be a good guy, this guy should be a bad guy. So it's kind of fun. So a lot of the names, I tweaked the names a little bit so it's not too obvious, but yeah. Some of the characters may not be completely unrelated to people I know. So
well, when you retired, you moved to Utah from the police force and worked with the youth. Do you think that stirred up, being around the youth, that stirred up your passion again to write again with science fiction? Or
I don't know if that really had a lot to do with it. I mean, you got to pay the bills, and it's you know, it's a lot safer job than police work. I don't get shot at, and you know, I don't have to carry a gun or anything in the job we do now. We get to, what we do now is we deal with at-risk youth, and we take them, escort them to programs like therapeutic schools and boarding schools and stuff. And the advantage of that is we've traveled all over the country. I mean, we've been to all 50 states. You know, at this point in time, I've done about 3,000 of these trips in the last 15 years. Yeah. So yeah, we got to travel a lot. The first trip to Hawaii we ever took, my wife Cheryl and I went to pick a girl up, and we scheduled an extra day because we'd never been to Hawaii. So you get to see a lot of the country and, you know, do a lot of stuff. And so that's a nice part of it. And you're helping families. You know, police work is great. It was fun, but unfortunately you're coming in usually when something terrible's happened, and you're kind of picking up the pieces. And what we do now is more positive. I mean, you've got a child who needs help, and so you're helping the parents get them the help they need. It's a lot more positive. And I, you know, I'm a grandpa. I have 4 little grandbabies now. My oldest granddaughter's 5, and let me see, 5, 3, 2.5, and 1 are my grandkids. And
Wow.
yeah, so yeah, I know. That's what I say. That's what I think. Wow, but they're a lot of fun. I just love them to death, and so I know how a parent would feel, you know, if I was in these parents' position. And so we try to make that as easy as possible. But as far as the writing goes, you know, I don't know if that stoked the writing or not. It's always there. It's neat because we have a lot of downtime doing this job. We're not always traveling, and so we have a lot of time at home. And so I'll be sitting on the couch. I'll flip open the laptop and start, you know, working on one of my books. So it affords me this job that we do affords me a lot of time to write, I guess is what I'm saying. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm sure. How did you learn? What did you find when you were having to build the characters? Did that come natural for you? Because I know when I interviewed another, he was a best-selling author, Walter Biondi. He wrote The Promiscuous Puppeteer, and he was telling me how fiction's so different because you're telling a lie. And so you have these charts. So it's not like you can write and then step away from it for a long time because you forget about the lie you've been telling, and you forget when you're writing the truth. It's easy to remember. And I thought that was I thought that was interesting. And I just wondered if that was the same thing you experienced. You have to really, I mean, how did you learn to build these characters and then keep up with everything? Because it's not like telling the truth.
Yeah, well, I do write a lot of notes when I'm writing. You know, I have a notebook. I have a couple notebooks actually that you just jot something down to kind of jog your memory, because when you do these stories, you know, you may have a character that doesn't make as many appearances as another character, and sometimes you have to go back in the book to reread what you've written to say, okay, because I want consistency throughout my book. I hate it when, you know, TV shows or movies are inconsistent, where they have something in a subsequent episode that doesn't match what was in a previous episode. I don't ever want to have anyone reading my book saying, well, hey, in the first book you said this, and now, you know, you're in the second or third book and you say, well, that doesn't match with the first book. So yeah, it's really tough. You got to keep track. And but as far as developing it, I guess I use a lot of traits in my characters. A lot of them are based on people that I know or I'm familiar with, or maybe, you know, in pop culture, you know, or in the news or something like that. You take little bits and pieces of that and kind of assemble them into a character that you want. Hopefully some of these characters I created aren't really running around. That's a little scary. I don't want some of these guys running around, but you know, a lot of the
I figured you did that, like the character Drake, you know, when you were describing him. I was thinking, I bet you used some people you've worked with and use some of their personality traits, you know.
Well, and that's the good thing about working with police officers is that, you know, the people I work with, the men and the women that I worked with, and we're still friends. I mean, I have on my Facebook page, I have 2 Facebook pages. I have one for my author career, and I have one to my personal page. And I have, like, you know, 100 of my old friends from the police department that are all my buddies on Facebook. And you know, a lot of the characteristics, like you said, Admiral Drake, he's the captain of the Pacifica, which is the main ship in the book. And yeah, the traits that he has are traits that I've seen in some of my, you know, some people that I've admired, I guess is the best way to put it. So yeah, that's helped to work around a bunch of really cool, you know, I guess honorable people. This sounds kind of corny, but it's really kind of the best way to put it. You know, people with a lot of nobility and integrity. Integrity is a good way to put it. And so yeah, you just kind of pick those characteristics and plug them into your characters, and so that's a good template. It's a good way to go.
Yeah. Well, how'd you come up with the character? Is it Gent? What was it? Gent?
Oh, the Lottie. Yeah. I don't know. I decided that since we're science fiction-y, I should probably throw some alien stuff in there. And so I just kind of thought to myself, yeah, it would be kind of cool if you had a species based on birds, that they've got wings and feathers and stuff. And they actually play kind of a minor role. I might expand that role later in the later books.
Yeah.
But they right now at the particular time in the story, they have a minimal role, and it's just not, I could force it where they're more into it, but it wouldn't make a lot of sense at this point in time. But they're there, and so I can use them later on. But I guess just to show that there's some diversity out there, I don't want everybody to be, white bread, same, all that kind of stuff. So
yeah. Well, what do you think your favorite part about writing is? Writing this what has been your favorite part so far? Is it the solitude, or for instance, or is it just the creative part? Or
actually, I kind of find it cathartic. It's I get to the point nowadays, I just don't even like reading the news. It's just so depressing, and there's so much conflict, and I don't think I can remember time since I can remember, politically, where the country's so polarized, and I just hate seeing the nasty stuff on both sides. I'm not picking a side over the other. And so I think it's a little bit of an escape. You can kind of withdraw yourself into your universe, and in my book, the good guys get over on the bad guys, and sometimes the bad guys win. And so when you write a sequence like that, it can be very fulfilling, I guess, is a good way to put it. I've had a couple of times where I'll just get inspired and write a whole sequence that just popped into my head, and it's you have these spurts of inspiration, and when you're done, you're like, yeah, that was really cool, and it's very satisfying. So I enjoy it. I think it's really a lot of fun. So
yeah, and I understand. I don't write. I write inspirational. That's what I write, and so I can't imagine writing fiction, but because it's a lot to keep up with, and I admire people who can do that. But I use my writing and my photography as an escape from what's going on in the world. And I've noted, I agree with you. I noticed that anybody I've had on my show, I'll kind of check on them and go to their page, see how they're doing, whether they're an artist, a musician, a writer, whatever, and just kind of see how they're doing. And I just kind of noticed that it seems like the people that are artists of whatever, they can get an escape from the negativity of the world. They just, whenever they delve into their art, and I think that's a blessing. I don't know what people who don't have another outlet, I don't know what they do, but it is a great escape, like you said. So,
well, and you asked about moving to Utah. Utah is just beautiful. We live in southern Utah, so we're close to a bunch of national parks, and my parents live here. My dad and I love to go fishing, and that's something we couldn't really do as much in California because it's just so many people and so crowded, and it's beautiful here. If there's a place that is conducive to writing, it's where I live, because we live at within sight of a mountain range, a beautiful mountain range, and when it snows, you've got snow-covered mountains to inspire you, and so I really enjoy that part of it. So I don't know if I could have been as creative if I'd have stayed in California. I don't know.
I know. I would. There's a lot of horses there, I would guess, too.
Oh my, yes. Everybody has horses and quads. The little four-wheelers. Everybody has a truck. It's interesting because I'm a city boy. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, and so I come out here, and these guys all have chickens and have fresh eggs and raise their own, have gardens and stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't, They're really cool about it, though, and I think they smile and understand that I'm learning the country life, and it's not a bad thing. It's but we only live a couple hours north of Las Vegas too. So if you if we want to have a night away and a nice meal or something, it's not that far. Cheryl and I can get away and and just go down and relax for a little bit. But we're far enough away from it where we don't have to deal with the, you know, all of the craziness that's down there. So it's really a nice place to be.
That's actually perfect. Really. Well, I wanted you to share just a little bit about your the first book, the invasion, about the story, so the viewers, anyone that's watching, will kind of know a little bit about what this is about. And
so the basic storyline is you've got humankind, and they develop technology to travel between the stars. And as they're doing their explorations, they come across this alien species called the Tamarah, which is the guy on the cover, the nasty looking mean one. And the Tamarah don't like the humans and decide that they're going to start a war with them. And the story actually takes place about 60 years after that first contact, and this war has been going on for decades. And in this particular part of the story, there's a scientific group that has developed this new power source that could be used as a great benefit to mankind, but could also be used as a horrible weapon, which is usually what happens when scientists get together and build something really powerful. So, and then the Tamarah, they have spies within the human scientists, and they invade the planet, which is why it's called Invasion at Miratev. Miratev is where the scientists are. So they invade this planet, and they're trying to steal this technology. And so, the main character, Grand Commander North, he's tasked with going and taking human forces there to try to get them out of that system and make sure they don't get this technology. And in the midst of that, we also learn about Omega section, the whole part of the Omega Chronicles. The Omega section, the Omega soldiers, are these super soldiers that work within the military, and they have special electronic implants in their brains that allow them to communicate telepathically with each other, and they can manipulate machinery and things like that. And so they're kind of super soldiers, and they play a huge part in the storyline. And so yeah, it's like I said, if you like space battles, there's plenty of that. You know, humans show up and the bad guys are there. Lots of fighting and explosions. So that's stuff I like. So that's what I wrote about. And
yeah, well, I like the way you brought Captain North in, and I'm a very visual person. So when I read, I'm a book. If I'm reading fiction, I can visualize it almost like in a movie form. And I like the way you introduced him and shared about that he had lost his wife and daughter. And then there was someone else he lost. Was it a brother 25 years ago or something that he...
Yeah, part of the story is that, and you know, I don't know, maybe this is a kind of a cheat, but in a way, you know, having him with no family is actually a little easier to follow the character, because then you don't have to include a lot of extra information. You know, his parents are gone, you know, they're gone, and my own parents are very much alive, but you know, and his wife and his wife and his son have been killed. And you find out later in the story, I don't want to spoil it, later in the story, that their death seemed like one thing, but it actually is tied into the main storyline. So I think that just creates a little bit of sadness and a little bit of conflict for that main character, and a little bit of motivation. And then at the beginning of the book, you read the first chapter. There's a sequence of events that kind of defines Commander North. You know, he had to make this horrible decision that was necessary, but it was really difficult to make. And that decision is what kind of follows him through the book. The bad guy is going after him and making his life miserable because of that decision that he made. And so yeah, the main bad guy, his name is Simons, and so he caused a lot of trouble during the story, during all three of the books. So, but I suspect his storyline, like I said, if things go as I plan, his storyline will probably resolve one way or the other in the third book. And but yeah. Oh, you asked about. I'm sorry, I got off track. You asked about his brother. So his brother, they're twins, him and his brother, Brandon's one and Jason's the other one. And Jason was also in the military. He was also a pilot, and he disappeared 23 years earlier. So
yeah, that's what it was. Yeah.
And so he's missing.
Yeah.
And
He's
so, yeah,
missing.
that's another motivation, because now his family's all gone. So he's a little sad and, you know, and wistful about things. And so anyway, I don't want to give up too much. I want people to read it and buy it and see how it goes.
No, you don't. I just like the way you gave a little bit of history there, because you did it very well, and it sort of gives the reader an idea of why he can stay away from, you know, home, and why he's able to do what he does. And it is sad, but I know it's going to all come together. So I think that's good. I liked it. I thought you did good. I just think fiction would be so hard to do. So.
Well, you know, this is the thing about fiction, is that I had when I went on to Amazon, you know, and there was one reviewer that said, oh, well, you know, some of the tactics that you used were, you know, this and that. I don't know if I agree with them. And I thought to myself, and I actually responded to this review. I said, well, that's the cool thing about science fiction. It's my universe. I can make whatever rules I want, you know, and
yeah.
unless the U.S. has a bunch of spaceships out there, they probably have never thought of any space tactics or anything. And so the cool thing about fiction, you know, the first book in a way is kind of more labor intensive, because you have to create your universe. You know, you have to establish how man travels, you know, to other planets, and you have to establish what kind of government there is and what the political climate is, and all of your main characters. And then the second and subsequent books, you've already got that all established, so you can pretty much just dive right into pure storyline and you know, more of the interesting stuff. So now that I have this one establishes my universe, and then from here I can go wherever I want. And because it's fiction, I can make whatever rules I want. It's my universe.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I think a trilogy is good. I didn't want you. I know earlier I said I think 3 is good. I've read a lot of trilogies, and I like that's a good. To me, 3 is always a good number. I think when I'm watching movies and they go on 5 and 6 and 7, then I kind of get, you know. But see, that's also the movie. The movies are always different from the book, so that's a big difference, you know.
Well, and you know, a lot of it has to do with money too. You know, I read the Hunger Games trilogy, which I'm not so much into young love or anything like that. I had nothing to do with it, but I like that's the kind of stories I like. You know, futuristic and conflict and that. And they managed, it's only a trilogy, the original Hunger Games trilogy, but they managed to squeeze like, I don't know, 4 or 5 movies out of it. You know, they split it up for the money, you know, and but yeah, the movies kind of cheat. I think it all comes down to dollars and cents. But yeah, I think a trilogy is enough, hopefully, to keep everybody's interest and pique it enough that if I want to continue afterwards with my characters, that they'll be interested to know where it goes afterwards and what happens to the characters that survive the trilogy. Don't get attached to anyone too much in these books. You never know who's gonna survive. It's like The Walking Dead, you know. It's like, I don't know if you watch that at all, but yeah, you don't get attached to characters on that show because they may not make it to next week.
Oh yeah. Well, how does one go? I know you've got a publisher and all that, but how does one go about finding a publisher and editor and all that? Because to me, that's one of the hardest parts almost. And in case there's some viewers here watching that maybe they're writing or want to write, and they just are hesitant because they don't know how to get to that next step.
And that is the most difficult part of the whole process. Writing the story is actually kind of the easiest part of it. You know, you have your story, and then you want to shop it around. And the thing with shopping it to publishers is, and it's all subjective. You know, there's some publishers that don't do science fiction or fantasy or that kind of thing. They only specify a specific genre of books, for instance. And then depending on the time of year or something, sometimes they'll be accepting submissions and sometimes they won't. But the best way to do it is there was a website, a resources that I went into. This is not the only one, but it's the one I happen to use. It's called the Writer's Market. And
the Writer's Market.
Yeah, I think it's writersmarket.com. In fact, I don't quote me on that because I'm not sure precisely. But I went in there and they have a listing of publishers, and that's the one I used, and they listed these publishers, and it would say first off if they were currently taking submissions, and then it would say what type of submissions they wanted, because like I said, some, you know, like there are some publishers that only want religious books, and there's some publishers that just do fantasy. And then some publishers that don't want, you know, like, you know, more vampire books, like what was that, the Twilight series, you know, they're kind of saturated with that. Some of them don't want that, but then some of them do specifically want other types of things. So the only way to really do it is just be patient and go online and find an example of a good cover letter. If you can find an agent, if you're willing to cough up a percentage of your money to an agent, that kind of can streamline the process. But sometimes that can be difficult. Agents are pretty particular sometimes. Unless you're established, they really don't want to mess with new writers. But you don't have to have an agent. If people are under the impression they have to have an agent to be published, that's not true. A lot of times it's easier not to deal with an agent. But you just have to make sure, and when you find a publisher, you have to go onto their website and see, because different publishers have different criteria for submission. Some of them like you to print out a hard copy and mail it to them. Some of them like an electronic submission. Some of them want the first 3 chapters. Some of them want the whole book. Be conscious also of the length of it, because if you have a novel that's 500,000 words long, that may turn off some publishers. The ideal is around, I think it's around 100 to 120,000 words is what most publishers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for a first, and that's not always the case. I mean, if you're J.K. Rowling, you can get away with, writing a 1,000,000-page novel, and someone would probably scoop it up at this point in time. But
that sounds like a lot of words.
It is a lot of work, and it is. You have to really, kind of be motivated to, if you want to do this successfully. And I was lucky enough. Gray Gecko is a small publishing house. They're an independent publisher. They're in Texas, and they took a chance on me, and so they are, they published my first one, and I'm grateful to them for that. So it's just, but it's, I can say this, it's really cool and it's really worth it. It's always neat to say, hey, I'm a published author, and it's. But like I said, if you use in the writer's market, again, is just the one that I use. There's several of them out there.
I'm sure.
But the important thing, like I said, is to research like for instance, you have to have a cover letter. It's like a hook. It's like if you think about, if you're going to pitch a movie to a producer, you want to have that initial hook that you present to them that says, hey, I've got this great idea, and then you present them with your idea. And sometimes, if you can't get their interest, then they'll pass on it. And that's kind of how it is with writing. You got to get that cover letter that wows them and hooks them in, and they maybe take an interest and sign you. You just never know. So
yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad I asked, and glad, because I think to me that would be the hardest part.
It is
just finding something. Yeah, I think that would be tough. But anyway, do you think this passion for writing will endure for a long time? Do you feel like it's something
I think so, because as I'm getting older, I like traveling less. So I get tired. I had to go on yesterday when I was talking to you before this, I was on a trip to Baltimore and Boston area, and 5.5 hour flight, man, I'll just wipe you out. I'll be 55 this year. And I can't. I get wiped out with some of this long traveling. So I would love to get to the point where I can crank out a book a year and make a good living at this. And never know, it may get to that point. I will say this, Sue McGahee is my friend. She actually got us together to do this interview. A real quick plug for Sue. I've known Sue for about over 20 years. She and her husband Al they're karate instructors, and they had a studio, and we went down, and my kids were taking karate, and they're the real deal. Her husband Al actually got his black belt from Chuck Norris. I mean, they're the real deal folks. And Sue, I kind of lost track with her karate career, but I know she's at least a 2nd or 3rd degree black belt in Shotokan karate. And then when we moved to Utah 16 years ago, we still kept in touch with them. That's a great thing about Facebook, is that it doesn't really matter where you live. You can still, stay in touch with these folks that you left behind. And now Sue is a publicist, and she's really good at her job. If you need somebody to do a great job for you, and it's always good to have a friend. I know Sue is not the type of person that would try to cheat me or anything like that. She's fabulous. So I would highly recommend her, but she's helping me do a lot of this stuff, and she's got a lot of great ideas, and she's definitely worth it. So thanks, Sue. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Sue. Well, I hate to end this, Brian, but I want to thank you again for being here today. This has been a lot of fun. Is there anything else you want to add that we didn't talk about or mention? How do people get your book?
Well, you can go on to Amazon. If you put in the keyword Miratev, because that's a very unique word, it'll pop right up to my book, and it's available on Kindle, of course, and I think a couple other platforms, Nook, and I can't remember what it was. There's a couple other ones, and then you can get hard copies and paperbacks. If for some reason, if you want to come find me at a signing or something, my plan is to visit Comic-Con this year, at least in Salt Lake. They have one in September. I would love to sign your book. If you'd want to come and talk to me, I'd love to sign that. If you happen to buy a hard copy or a paperback and you want to shoot it to me for a signature, I would love to sign anyone's book that wants to do that. I'll put a nice inscription and send it back to you. But I'm hoping that you'll like it enough to want me to keep going and see where my characters wind up. So I'm having a good time. Hopefully I can, get some people to get some interest in it as well. So
yeah, and they can find you. I'll put your link in under the YouTube video, because they can find you on Facebook at the Omega Chronicles, and I can put that link there. And because you have a website, or that
I have a Facebook page that is specifically Omega Chronicles,
right?
And I have an author page. I have a personal Facebook page that kind of I just reserve for the family and friends, but
right.
But anyone that wants to friend me on my author page, I'll be happy to include you in there, and you can chat with me through that. I have a Twitter too that's actually the Omega Chronicles on Twitter. And Sue, bless her heart, she's more tech minded than me. She's setting me up for Instagram. I'm learning a lot of this stuff. So
yeah.
So yeah, that's all there. I'm happy to talk to anybody that had this questions for me. You can contact me through any of those means.
Okay, awesome. Okay, that's good. Well, and I'll make sure those links are under the YouTube video. So I want to thank the viewers too for their continued support. And you can see the replay of this, and please share it so that I can continue to support Brian and his new book. And, the replay will be on my Tamarah's Closet YouTube channel, where you are now if you're watching it live. And there'll be a copy in my website at tamarahscloset.com. So check that out. Please share it so I can continue to celebrate him. And join me in March for more talented people from all over the world. So to the viewers, to your own success, keep on rocking it, and we'll see you next time.